Welcome back. We're talking about the foreign policy of Donald Trump and its potential impact, whether he wins or loses. For the view on Russia and European relations, from London, we're joined by Alexander Nekrassov. He is a former advisor to the Russian government, and Holger Stark is the Washington correspondent for Der Spiegel. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Alexander, let's talk about Trump's policy on Russia. He likes and respects President Vladimir Putin. He thinks Putin is a leader. He's also said that he thinks that Ukraine is a European problem. What does one make of these sentiments? I mean, are Russian-U.S. relations going to get a lot better if he becomes president?
Well, first of all, to be honest, it can't get worse than under Obama. So let's face it, that, people in the Kremlin and Mr. Putin are having a chuckle on the one hand, listening to Mr. Trump. But on the other hand, they understand that they have to wait for the new president. With Obama, it's a no-go situation. And I don't even know how worse it can get. So to say that the Russians are supporting Trump and want him to win, I don't think so. I mean, I'm enjoying this farce with the elections. I'm enjoying what Mr. Trump is doing to the grand old party. And I think the whole system of elections in America is being seen through a different light with him, because it has become ridiculous, to be honest. The country which purports to be the beacon of freedom of the world has one of the most corrupt systems of election of its president, with billions of dollars thrown in, with the media basically deciding for the people who is the best candidate. And for what it was, 140 million people didn't vote in the last presidential elections in America. So yes, it's a circus, but some of the things that Mr. Trump says make sense, because what's happening now as regards Russia and American policy towards Russia, it is total chaos. And I don't think anyone in the Kremlin or in the Russian government sees any possibility of improving these relations. Okay, we had a bit of luck, I would say. I would call it luck, actually, with America and Russia doing a deal over Syria. But that was just a small thing in the wider picture of things. But as regards Ukraine, for example, which is a very troublesome development, and I don't think that this crisis will be sorted out soon. I think Obama's policy towards Ukraine is basically devastating, destructive, and it is technically pushing the world to a third world war in Europe.
Right.
So on the one hand, it's entertaining. On the other hand, it's really very depressing.
Right. Holger, the closest allies of the United States are to be found in the countries of Europe. Yet Trump's view is that Europe is getting a free ride from the United States. Let's take a listen to what he said about that.
Our allies are not paying their fair share. Our allies must contribute toward their financial, political, and human costs, have to do it, of our tremendous security burden. But many of them are simply not doing so. They look at the United States as weak and forgiving and feel no obligation to honor their agreements with us.
How does Europe feel when they hear statements like that?
Well, something between disturbed, concerned, irritated. They watch what's going on in America, and they basically don't understand what it is about. It's not that foreign policy is just like a marketplace where you run a business. It's about bigger values. And there is this bigger Western part of the world which has been unified for like 60, 70 years since World War II. And there's a strong alliance between the European countries like Germany and the United States. And America has always been the leader of that free part of the Western world. And suddenly Trump is questioning all that. He's challenging to get out of the NATO, which is probably the strongest military alliance the world has ever seen. Why? Because Europe is not paying enough. Europe is paying on different fields. Europe is paying for refugees in the migrant crisis. Europe is standing close to the United States when it comes to the Ukraine crisis. And allow me to respectfully disagree with Alexander. I think it can get much more worse than under Obama. If Trump is realizing what he's saying, then he basically is breaking down that Western alliance.
Just getting back to what you said a moment ago, I mean, as you point out, there was this security architecture, if we could call it that was put in place after the Cold War ended, which is what it looks like right now. Is that going to be undone by Donald Trump?
If he is going to realize what he's saying right now, I would say yes, because you never could count on America. What would happen in Syria? He's claiming that he would bomb the ISIS positions, but he wouldn't interfere. What would happen with the migrant crisis? He definitely wouldn't participate in any kind of support of that. What would happen in the Ukraine? He would leave Europe alone. What's the address? What's the message to the Eastern European countries like the Baltic states? You're on your own. So he is not showing any kind of solidarity. I think that's not in his DNA to stand to someone just because of his values. He's driven by his capitalist idea of running an enterprise, dealing with people. I think he's an isolationist who's showing flexing muscles to make deals and not to stand allied next to friends.
Alexander, let's take a listen to what Donald Trump thinks of President Putin. Let's watch this.
He's a very colorful person, talented without a doubt, but it's not our affair to determine his worthiness. That's up to the U.S. voters. But he is absolutely the leader in the presidential race. He wants to move to a different level of relations, to more solid, deeper relations with Russia. And how can Russia not welcome that? We welcome that.
Actually, what I meant to say that's Vladimir Putin's view of Donald Trump. Why does President Putin like him so much?
Well, to be honest with you, I think Mr. Putin is trying to tempt Mr. Obama more than Mr. Trump, because it's a tongue-in-cheek characterization. And I can assure you that in the Kremlin, they understand all this farcical side of the election campaign in America. It's just that occasionally, Donald Trump says something which makes sense, and makes sense for Russian ear. And for example, when he says that NATO has outlived itself, which it did, because NATO is an anti-Russian, well, anti-Soviet, but now anti-Russian aggressive pact. It's not a defensive pact anymore. After Ukraine and what happened in the Baltics and so on, after these countries were joined NATO,
right.
It has now become obvious that NATO has become aggressive. So you see, elements of what he says make sense. On the whole, of course, this is not a serious foreign policy manifesto, and it remains to be seen what will happen when he takes on Hillary Clinton, if he actually gets the nomination.
Okay. Holger, let me ask you this very quickly. Is Europe going to take another look at its relationship with the United States? Because whether Donald Trump is elected or not, I mean, the point is that Europeans must be sensitive and aware of the fact that what he says has some currency among people in the United States.
Well, there's clearly this view that America has to withdraw from the world's conflicts, and that Donald Trump is appealing to and representing in the American public. I think for the Europeans, it couldn't be a more radical decision. Hillary Clinton, who would stand for a long-term tradition in American foreign policy, and Donald Trump, who's standing for the opposite, who would withdraw, who would step back, who would probably get out of a couple of alliances. So European leaders are significantly concerned. They reach out in secret to Trump's people to find out if it's for sure what he's saying, if he will do that or not. And everybody is begging that either she will be elected, or that he is saying something that he's not meaning at the end.
Because the general feeling here in the United States is what this election campaign so far has thrown up is that people are saying, we do not want business as usual.
Right. I think we're really at a crossroads, and this will be extremely interesting what's going on the next month.